Hey guys, it's Travis with Academy Endeavors. Today we are going to talk about the elimination of race-based admissions policies at the service academies, a thrilling topic that I'm sure is going to get a lot of attention. But first, I want to provide an Academy Endeavors update on what we're seeing around the world of admissions. Right now it is September 24th, 2025 at the time of this recording. The Naval Academy has just, as of yesterday, released their first round of LOAs, or letters of assurance, that have gone out. Several of our clients have been, I wanted to say lucky enough to get one, but the truth is they earned it. They're honored and they earned an LOA. It's a huge deal, especially in the fall. That's what we're gearing for. That's why we submit applications early, and that's why we work so hard up until that point, because they're only given out to the cream of the crop and there's very few of them available. The Merchant Marine Academy has also started to grant LOAs. The first one we saw was a couple days ago. September is LOA season, the beginning of LOA season. West Point, I think on our last video we said this, West Point is usually the earliest. They give them out early as sometimes late July, but definitely in August. And then Naval Academy is next. And then Air Force Academies usually lags into October, November timeframe. Why do we emphasize the LOA so much? Why are we talking about that? That is one of the biggest things that happens in Academy admissions before the nominations are released. So nomination deadlines are right about now. They start, could be as early as August 31st, as late as December 1st. They're going to be in the fall, somewhere in September, October, November. But no decisions have been made yet on nominations. It's just too early. And so the results that we hope for in the early fall are LOAs, so that we can then turn around and tell our nomination offices that we have an LOA, humbly and respectfully. And by the way, the nomination office should be notified by the Academy as well. But sometimes they ask, and when they do ask, or even if they don't, we can send that in advance of the interview, which is a huge signal from the Academy admissions that, look, we want this guy or we want this gal. And so we have yet to, in 6 years of coaching, we have yet to see an LOA not get a nomination. And very few don't get the medical clearance. That's a whole separate process. But that's what you need first. If you get the LOA, you need two things. You need the nomination and you need the medical clearance. So as of now, that's really the biggest thing going on. When we do our next few videos, we'll probably be talking about nominations. Right now, we just heard from one of our clients that they were granted an interview invite for one of their nomination boards. And that happens to be in the state of Florida, which is one of the earliest deadlines. They were all due in September. So we're going to start to see that more and more in the fall as we go. So that's really one of the biggest things going on in the world of Academy Endeavors. Let's get back to the topic at hand. Let me give you some context as far as race and admissions goes, a very hot topic. In June of 2023, the Supreme Court heard a case called Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. In this case, they listened to, it was Harvard and actually University of North Carolina, so a private university and a public university. And what they did was they basically said, their decision was that race-based admissions has now been eliminated. The colleges can still ask for race, just like always. However, when it comes down to deciding who to award or who to grant admission to, that is going to be masked. Okay, so race is not going to be considered as a determining factor on whether they're accepted or not. In that Supreme Court decision, service academies were explicitly called out as not being involved in that, meaning service academies could still include race in their determination process on whether who's worthy of an appointment. Fast forward, the new administration, President Trump was elected. There was a new Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of Defense issued a memorandum. And I'm going to share the screen here, but on May 9th, 2025, so just a few months ago, the subject, certification of merit-based military service academy admissions, effectively saying, hey, now guess what, guys? The service academies are no longer excluded from the Supreme Court decision, but now, by orders of the Secretary of Defense, race should not be considered a factor. It should be based on merit alone. That is what happened. So next, and almost simultaneous to this, is when a new president comes into office, they appoint certain board members. They can appoint up to 6 board members to each of the service academies. So there's a board of visitors, and this is public information. You can look it up. The Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, West Point has a board of 14 or 15 people, 9 of which is appointed by Congress. In fact, the Air Force Academy does a good job in their website of actually breaking it out. So I'm actually going to show you this. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that were appointed by the president for oversee USAFA. And then Congress, either the Speaker of the House Minority Leader, Senate Majority Leader, Senate Minority Leader, and then various committees get to appoint the other. So that comes out to 15 total, roughly 14, 15, 16, around there. Okay. Point is that between the president appointing and appointing a minority, but it all being probably the party or affiliated with the party that is in the executive branch at the time, it could sway, and it does sway every 4 years, how the Board of Visitors governs now, or how they see things, okay, their policies and how they see the world, their worldview. So in this case, so this is Air Force Academy, and then here's West Point, and here is the Naval Academy. What you'll see is that because of the new administration, and it happened the same 4 years ago with President Biden appointing his appointees, thought a certain way about these topics, about diversity and inclusion, you'll see that there is influence in the Board of Visitors. And so that determines, they meet quarterly, okay? And the superintendent of the academy, who's a 3-star general or a 3-star admiral, as well as either the secretary of the Air Force, secretary of the Navy, secretary of the Army, report to the Board of Visitors on everything going on, the climate and the culture at the academy, and the institutional policies, etc. One of those is admissions. So because of that, those two things kind of happening simultaneously, we come to the first admission cycle where it is entirely under kind of a new way of thought compared to the previous 4 years. And we see this even publicly. Another signal that times are changing a little bit is the Naval Academy always has their class profile, and this is just one example. Every academy has their class profile, and in the class profile, historically, it's always included race. This is percent Caucasian, the percent Asian, the percent African American that have been admitted, right? It's just one statistic that comprises each of the classes. Well, when I went on there recently, I noticed that the Naval Academy actually took that down. So they still have the class profile up, but they've excluded any race-based metrics. Thought that was interesting. How does this affect you? You are a parent listening to this and you're supporting your child's journey. They have a dream to go to the academy. Or you are an applicant listening to this, an aspiring applicant, you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or you're a senior, you're in the application process. How is this going to affect you? I'm going to provide 3 predictions that are Academy Endeavor's perspective. They might or might not be true, right? Because no one fully knows the truth of what will transpire yet. I can tell you some signals like I have and give you context. This is prediction number 1. I believe there's still going to be a decent spread. The next class is not going to be, to use an extreme example, it's not going to be all Caucasian males. Okay, there's males and females. There's going to be several different minorities. That's going to exist. And so to kind of eliminate the fear-based mentality, or that one party is going to completely have their way, and we're in a very hot political environment right now, right? And so we think certain things about the other party, whatever party line we are affiliated with, we think the worst of the other side. And so if you happen to be on the left side of the fence, you're thinking worse of the right. And if you're on the right side of the fence, you're thinking worse of the left. We believe at Academy Endeavors, there's still going to be a significant spread. Here's why. One is that, and this is just obvious, is that with merit-based, they're going to look at SAT scores, they're going to look at GPA, they're going to look at leadership positions, they're going to look at recruited athletes. That's part of merit. And there are certain sports that definitely have a certain track record of being affiliated with certain races. When you look at basketball versus you look at tennis versus you look at football versus you look, these sports tend to have certain track records of certain races. And so that's going to still make it a diverse place as far as the class goes. Second prediction is we believe that perhaps the demographic that's going to be, that I'm most interested to see that might change going forward, is the prep school slots. So to give you some context on prep school, in order to apply to the prep school, you have to apply straight to the academy. Okay, there is no separate application process. And the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, West Point have their own prep schools that are run by them. So the United States Air Force Academy Prep School, the Naval Academy Prep School called NAPS, and USMAPS, the United States Military Academy Prep School. Two of them are on the actual base and co-located. One of them, the Naval Academy Prep School, is in Rhode Island, so it's a bit far away. But the point is, they're in charge of those prep schools, and there are about 200 students every year that are admitted to those. There are an additional 100 people, 100 applicants that are given foundation scholarships. So back up a second, the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, and West Point, they have foundations that have been set up to fund scholarships for applicants to go if you don't get directly accepted and if you don't get a prep school offer. West Point calls it civil prep, or Air Force Academy calls it the Falcon Foundation Scholarship. I believe Naval Academy calls it Foundation Scholarship as well. These scholarships, they also fund about 100 students per year. And they go to a civilian prep school like Georgia Military College, Marion Military Institute in Alabama, NIMI, New Mexico Military Institute in New Mexico, Hargrave Military Academy in Chatham, Virginia. So these are civilian. They are not affiliated with the military directly or Department of Defense. But the next year, if you complete that program and are sponsored by one of the academies, you're probably 80 to 90, 100% of it is going to be covered by them. And then you get to go to the academy the next year. 90% chance you would get in if you did everything academically and conduct-wise the right way. About 100 every year, like I was saying. So that's 300 total. Now, typically, of the 200 that go to the prep schools, they're in 3 buckets, typically. Before the new administration, it was recruited athletes. If you're a recruited athlete, you got a football offer, and you can't get directly in because of a low SAT score, they'll send you to the prep school, and it's like a redshirt year, and then you can go play football the next year. That's how the academies use it. These are D1 football programs. They got to produce a good football team somehow, right? Second bucket is historically was underrepresented minorities. So this was a way for the academies to meet their diversity goals. And third was underrepresented districts. So they were congressional districts where the academies have a hard time recruiting. And if they had a qualified applicant, but had a low SAT score or a low GPA, didn't quite have the academics to get straight in, the prep school was historically a great place to go for a year. And that's what they would use it as. And so what I'm interested to see is that second bucket that I said, underrepresented minorities. I think what we're going to see prediction-wise is we're going to see more majority culture Caucasian students get a chance to go to the prep school that are not recruited athletes, which historically has not been available to them. And you could argue, perhaps unfair, depending on your political leanings and how you see diversity and inclusion. For the 100 that foundation slots, that was typically a little bit more open to majority culture students, whereas they weren't necessarily using that to meet their diversity needs, but sometimes they were. And it definitely wasn't recruited athletes. So that was more open to historically majority culture students, Caucasian students. I'm interested to see as well, how are they going to use the foundation slots from a merit-based perspective and no race included at all. So I think this is an opportunity, depending on if you are Caucasian or not, to perhaps have an increased chance of getting a prep school slot if the prediction lands, right? So in review, I still think there's going to be diversity at the academy for those of you that are concerned about because of recruited athletes. Also, something else I didn't talk about that was in the first point is enlisted. So there are about 90 to 100 enlisted every year that come over to the academy and start as a freshman. They might be 19, 20, 21 years old. The oldest they can be, I think, is 22. And they come over and they start as a freshman and then they're an officer. Some of those enlisted folks are diverse from a race-based perspective. I don't think it's going to change drastically as much as people might think, because here's the deal, and this is prediction number 3, is that they're still going to target financial hardship. It's still a question in the application. And merit-based has to do with getting the best and the brightest students. But if you have a true financial hardship, which categorically speaking affects Black and Hispanic students more so in this country than white, typically, not always, okay, but just the metrics say so, then in inner city areas in the United States where they have had difficulty, where the academies have traditionally had difficulty capturing and attracting qualified applicants. When I say qualified, it's people that have a nomination, people that have the medical clearance, people that can pass the fitness. Those young people, race or not, doesn't matter, but it's going to be more of a certain race. You know, it's going to be more minority than majority, my prediction. Then those people will still have somewhat of a privilege in the process because they're considering, for example, think about this, and we've actually like met families with this. and we give out financial hardship scholarships as a company, so this is near and dear to our heart, we have served families that fall into this. So case in point, mom or dad, right? Mom and dad could be a one income household, maybe it's a single mom household, or it could be a refugee situation, right? They fled years ago and now they're here, and child was born in the US, is a citizen, right? Parents might not be, they're first generation American. Okay, and they're struggling just to get by, live in an apartment, government stipends to make ends meet. Check this out. Maybe that student has to get a full-time job and can't participate in varsity sports, or can't participate, doesn't have time to study as much, doesn't have time to pay for the professional tutor for SAT, and thus goes to work instead and gets a full-time job or a 30-hour, 20-hour-a-week job while they're in school, and it's school and work, school and work. Now, the question is, should that person be given some sort of leeway, or if they had the same opportunity as another person, they're just as smart, they're kicking butt in the classroom, they just don't have maybe the SAT score and the leadership because they don't have time, because they're going to work. So that's why financial hardship is taken into consideration, and that has not been eliminated, right? They're still asking about that. And so because of that, I think the academies are still some of the greatest institutions in the country as far as, one, meeting incredibly diverse students in a lot of other ways besides race, experiences. And think about this, by design, they are the most diverse, geographically diverse college in the country because of the congressional nomination process. Because 85% of all the students, the reason they're getting admitted is through a congressman or a senator. And by design, there's a cap for each of the congressmen and senators. So they're attracting people from all over. And me personally, I can attest to this because I'm from Southern California, and two of my best friends at the Air Force Academy when I went were from Oklahoma and rural Mississippi. And it's phenomenal. It's wonderful to meet people from all over the country. And you do that at these academies because of the congressional nomination process by design. Secondly, they're still taking into account the financial diversity piece. And third, they have to field 25 to 35 Division I sports teams, and that takes up 25% of the class. I'm hopefully representing even both sides of the political aisle by saying, yes, I still think it's going to be diverse, and I also think it's going to be an opportunity from some subsets that were excluded or overlooked because of race that might now have a shot, especially at a prep school or a foundation scholarship. Okay, so those are some of the predictions going forward. But hopefully, if anything, you came away knowing a little bit more context as to everything that went into this and everything that is going into this, to be more aware of the Academy admissions process so you can help your son or daughter through this process, so you can ultimately help your son or daughter get into the Academy of their dreams. Hot topic and a tough one to talk about, I have to say. Going to be critiqued either way you say it, but that is what's going on. We'll be back in a couple weeks to give you more from Academy admissions. Thank you, as always, for listening in. Please subscribe and have an awesome rest of your day.